Pick up the phone. ChatGPT is calling with today's special guest, Alex Puga. Today's episode is brought to you by the bestseller ChatGPT Profits. This book is the missing instruction manual to get you up and running with ChatGPT in a matter of minutes. As a special gift, you can get it absolutely free at artificialintelligencepod.com/gift or at the link right below this episode. Make sure to grab your copy before it goes back up to full price. Are you tired of dealing with your boss? Do you feel underpaid and underappreciated? If you want to make it online, fire your boss, and start living your retirement dreams now, then you come to the right place. Welcome to the Artificial Intelligence Podcast Show, where you will learn how to use artificial intelligence to open new revenue streams and make money while you sleep. Presented live from a tropical island in the South Pacific by best-selling author Jonathan Green. Now, here's your host. I'm really excited to have you here, Alex, because there have been a lot of changes, especially recently, with how AI is getting used more and more. And now that there's more real-time ability and there's more AI voices, a lot of people are starting to think, should I have ChatGPT answer the phone for me? Should I have an AI do the sales calls? And there's a lot of different versions of that, everywhere from an AI does the entire sales process to AIs are doing cold calling to AIs are doing video calling. And just maybe start off by just letting us know, where is the world right now? What tools are actually working and what tools are making promises they can't quite live up to just yet?
Yeah, definitely. I think, first of all, thanks for having me. And yeah, very great question. I think there's a lot of tools that might be overpromising, a lot of tools that are building things that are of value, but might not be where we hope, where we expect them to be. In my day-to-day, I use a lot of different jobs. I like to say Hypergrowth, a research and development firm. In a way, we like to experiment with a lot of different tools. Obviously, since ChatGPT was released to the public about 2 years ago, which is crazy. Time flies. It seems like it was just this year, but a lot of people have been leaning on or trying to cut corners, I'd like to say, using AI. And unfortunately, we can't really trust that the tools are at that point yet today. And that point being letting them run loose and get the job done. And then you can just really trust that the job is getting done. Currently, the way we do things now is we're really hands-on. We want to make sure that the AI essentially is doing what it needs to be doing. That requires a lot of manual checks, making sure that whether it's the data that we're sourcing is clean or even the messaging is right. I've played around with a lot of different tools. I'm sure you've heard, or you may have heard in the past, of like Clay, for example. They're big right now. They're essentially a platform that allows you to piece together your workflow, AI included. You're able to touch or passing your API key points and essentially query their ChatGPT, their AI, using the information that was scraped online to then provide or build a personalized, relevant message. So Clay's one of those big players out there. I think they're one of the good ones that aren't necessarily over-promising. They're just like, here's a platform. A lot of the time, there is some skill that goes into prompting AIs. So it's not just about using them. You need to know how to use them correctly. So that's where Clay comes in. And they really do have a lot of nice resources that explain and show you how to prompt these AIs. And they're not promising any magic there. Other tools, other AI tools, besides just the typical Claude, Anthropic, and Chat AI, are very few. So we want to be able to, I think today a lot of tools are saying there's AI, but it's just not as seamless as we think. I wish I could give out a few more tools, but I think at the top of my head right now, Clay is one of those big players that a lot of people are using and starting to look into.
So it's really interesting to me. So I have a couple of ideas in my head. The first is that a lot of times, like data mining, things get one or two things wrong. So especially my name is super common. There are tens of thousands of people with the name Jonathan Green. So it's very common for people to mix me up with other Jonathan Greens because there's just so many of us. I'm not the only author. There's one Jonathan Green writes movies like A Fault in Our Stars was written by another John Green. And then there's a science fiction author, and then there's a famous painter. So there's a lot of people with the name. And there's also a lawn care company called Jonathan Green. So I used to when people search my name, that would come up first. So one of the things that I always worry about is false positives. So it's that thing you do where you try to show someone like how much you care and you say the names of their kids, but then you get one wrong. That little mistake ends up actually undoing all the positives of doing that research. And that's one of the challenges. And even when I take one of these podcasts and I have an AI write the show notes, sometimes it mixes me and the other person up and will write stuff about the other person that is about me. And these little mistakes can get bigger and bigger. So that's one of the things I worry about with data mining when you're just not paying attention. It's like, I always want to say, what's the source? Because sometimes we all have seen where ChatGPT will just lie to you. And the other thing I think about a lot is trust. Sales, especially over the phone, is so much about, do I trust this person? Same thing even when you're buying a car. Do I think this person's telling me the truth, or are they taking me for a ride? And when you put AI in the middle, if someone realizes it, that can shatter the trust. So the best way to make people hate you is to trick them, because then they either they're dumb or you're a jerk. That's their two choices for what happened. And so they will dramatically get really mad at you. I've seen this happen more common when someone leaves a comment and they think it's a really nice comment, and the author of the social media post responds, and then they realize it was an AI comment. They get so mad, like really mad. Even I don't get that mad about it. I get annoyed, but I've seen people like level 10 rage. Like they want the person's social media accounts deleted. They want the person banned from the internet because of the switch from feeling good to feeling bad. So that's my biggest fear with having AI in the process, because these little mistakes can happen. I used to have, when my YouTube channel was really small, I just set up to have ChatGPT automatically reply when someone would leave a post. And at first it would just say, oh, thanks for the comment, whenever someone would say something simple, stuff like that. And then someone asked me if I was the one who'd made a piece of software. And then ChatGPT goes, yep, we sure did. What do you think of it? And I was like, that's a lie. It was like a huge lie. So I turned it off immediately when I saw that. Because up until then, it was supposed to just do, when people leave a mean comment, just respond positively. So, unlike me, I don't get pulled into it. And that's the danger, is that AI has variance. So sometimes it will drift a little bit and say something that's just completely not true. And now you're stuck. Either you tell the person, oh, that was an AI, I've been tricking you the whole time, or you have to stick with whatever the AI promised or whatever lie it said. So those are kind of things that I worry about a little bit, especially with AI on phone calls.
Yeah. And that's what I was mentioning earlier. You have to babysit it quite a bit, making sure that it's not pulling the wrong person. It's not saying the wrong things. It's not quoting the wrong sources. That's basically that trust factor, right? Like as a user, like being able to trust AI as a user. And then obviously you touched on being able to trust it from a receiving standpoint. And you're totally on point with that. If I were to receive just an automated message, it's so easy to ignore and just archive it, pass it on into delete, whatever the case is. And then you're just like, look, these people aren't even going to know if I saw the message or anything. They probably sent this message out to thousands of others. You have that feeling that it doesn't matter if I don't respond because it's just an AI. I'm not hurting anyone's feelings at that point. But then, yeah, there's also that trust factor from the user perspective where it's, can I let it run loose and will it do what I want it to do without breaking the trust of others?
And we've started to see some phone companies and other big companies build fake AIs to answer the phone. Well, especially like they always seem to be elderly. Like I just saw a new one of a video grandma that it's designed to answer the phone for a cold call and just string the person on as long as possible. So I feel like we're going to get to the point where it's just AIs talking to each other on the phone. And it's just like your AI calls and my AI answers, and nothing ever happens except for we just use up more and more electricity and resources for this kind of silliness, that there's like a desperation for authenticity that I'm seeing in the market, which is people really want to know if you're a person. It used to be they want to know if you're a pen name or if you're using someone else's pictures. Right now it's, are you an AI? Are you a real person at all? Are you a composite? And most of the messages I get, like when people email me or respond to me on LinkedIn, the first message is usually like trying to see if I'm a real person. Like you're touching to see if it's a hologram. So we've already added in this new layer, which is, am I talking to a real person? And it can be really small things that break trust. Like I get asked a lot if my background is real or if it's like a generated background. So I have to walk back towards the wall all the time to show people. Because if I just say it's real, that doesn't prove anything because I already have the background up. And if it was AI generated, it would look better. Like, it would be even better. It would better than it is. There's always change I want to make, but we're really at this point now where like trust is getting harder and harder to grab onto because there are so many AI tools out there. And once you've been burned one time, once you bought something online and didn't get it, or once you've talked to someone and it wasn't a real person, then it's so much harder for the next person. Like you have to recover from that. It's like when someone comes out of a bad relationship, the next person has to suffer for whatever the previous person did. So all that like baggage comes into it. So when you're looking at what you're doing in AI and sales now, like how can you carve out this space where AI is useful, but not to the point where it like puts trust in danger, and especially because like I have to massively over calibrate because I'm an AI person. People expect me to use AI more. So I have to use it less to make up for that, to calibrate. So how do you deal with that as you're really building out AI in sales? And this is the thrust of what you're working on.
Yeah, exactly. Like previously mentioned, I think we really need to babysit. That's the biggest thing. Essentially, we don't want to be checking every single response that we're getting, but we are definitely checking most of the responses. So with that and just being able to prompt the chat as specifically as possible to get the results we're looking for. I think currently we do want to get to this whole AI SDR world where, set and forget it. But Hypergrowth does is we're essentially handholding the AI agents that we do use through every step of the process. If there's any point where it begins to hallucinate or do something that we're not really expecting it to do, that's where we put a halt to it. And then we manually take over from there. Ultimately, the goal for us is to use AI to augment our current skills. And like you said, the whole trust factor there too. The more, or you mentioned that the more we begin to use these AI agents, the more we are looking for this like human touch. And everyone's saying, oh, AI is going to replace us, this and that. But no, not really. You're going to get replaced by someone that's using AI. And we've probably heard this a million times now already. But that's what hypergrowth is really doing is it's like human first, AI second. If AI is proving to do what it should be doing, we let it run. But the second that it doesn't, we step right in and take over from there. Not sure if that makes a lot of sense, but that's the direction we move in.
I think that's really good. One of the things that I encounter a lot is lazy prompting. And I think it's not the user's fault so much as the AI company's fault, because they've over promised how easy it is to get a good result from ChatGPT or Claude or from any tool. So people don't realize that there's a skill or an art to it. And there seem to be like two schools of thought. One school of thought is it's so easy. It works on the first try, right? That's the big promise that you sign up. And the other end of the spectrum is a lot of people say, oh, it's just like learning Python. And I'm like, that's hard. Like, that's not easy. Like programmers think programming is easy, but everyone else thinks it's really hard. And sometimes people think I know how to program. And so they'll say something to me and I go, that sounds impossible. I have no idea how to do that. I can copy and paste. That's my level of programming ability where I can fill in a blank. So when people start talking about specific code beyond that, I'm like, I have no idea what these things mean, right? I can tell if something's working or not, but these two ends of the spectrum. So there's people that think it's really easy or people that think it's crazy hard. And it really falls somewhere in the middle. Like you can become a decent user if you just sit down for one day and say, today, I'm just going to try a lot of different prompts, a lot of methods and see what works for me. If you sit down for 8 hours straight, you'll be pretty good at it. Python, you cannot learn in 8 hours. I think you could learn in 2 years. So it's not 5 minutes, but it's also not weeks and weeks. So unfortunately, it all falls apart like a house of cards. Like you said, if you there's two things where I think people make a lot of mistakes. The first is they don't spend enough time to get into their prompting. And it doesn't take a lot of time. You just have to play around with it a little bit and try different answers. And the second part is that people really like to skip the quality assurance. Now, this was before my time, and certainly before your time. Used to be that when you would dictate a letter to your secretary, at the end of it, it would say dictated but not read, which means said it out loud. She wrote the letter, but I didn't check it. So if something's wrong, it's her fault, not mine. And maybe we should add that when we have the AI write a social media post, prompted but not read, because every time someone runs into trouble, it's when they don't double check. And like I got lucky that I caught when ChatGPT lied with that YouTube comment right away. I go, whoa, that was like a huge jump from, it used to be like, oh, thanks for your comment. Now it's, oh yeah, that's our company. What do you think of it? So slow down. I don't want trouble here. But if you're not checking, that's when you get into the biggest trouble, because I've seen where people, it's again, we fall into this, we believe it's so good that we don't check the work. And this is the same problem you can have with employees. If you hire a phone salesperson and you don't check their calls, you can end up with a problem. They can be lying. They could be losing sales they should be keeping. Anything could be happening, right? You always have to have some component, especially because there's a lot of laws about phone calls. Like you're supposed to record them and check them and all these things to make sure you're not breaking the law and doing, because I used to be in phone sales and I know there's tons and tons of rules, right? All sorts of regulations. You can't promise things that aren't true. So you have to be very careful. So if you're not checking that stuff, you can actually get into a lot of trouble. And it's the same with any employee. If an employee knows you're not checking their work, what are they going to do? It's going to start to go down. And I know this because I've done this many times where I haven't checked the work and suddenly it collapses after 6 months. You have to have an element of you're checking the work or you're paying attention. But we treat AI it's somewhere in between a tool and an employee. And I think it's because we think of it almost like a magic genie, that we don't check the work and then it does stuff that we regret. Like I was thinking, because I thought a lot about, since our first chat, about the idea of if there's an AI that sounds like me, right? It does, say, the first half of the phone call or whatever. If it promises something or if it says something like, because the problem with ChatGPT is that it always wants to give a positive answer. So if someone says, oh, I was bullied in high school, then ChatGPT will go, oh yeah, I was bullied too. It's the worst, isn't it? Now I am stuck, right, with a backstory that's not true, or whatever it says, because it's always rapport seeking. So you can get stuck having to keep these promises that are not true. And little things can become a huge problem. So when I wrote my first book, I wasn't married yet. I was dating my wife. And so in that book, I call her my girlfriend. And then later on, but it's like people expect me to go back and change it to wife in the book, which I'm not going to do. That's weird. I'm not going to re-edit a whole book just to change one thing. In later books, I call her my wife. We've been together a long time. And the number of kids I have changes. So now I have 5 kids, which means if someone's listening to this in a few years, maybe I'll have 6 kids or 7 kids and the number will change. But the little thing, people bring that up. People have brought up the girlfriend thing many times. They go, oh, when are you going to marry her? I'm like, we've been married for like 8 years now. Long time ago. But that's the thing, that if something as small as that becomes an issue, what happens if an AI version says, oh, I'm lactose intolerant, or even worse, I'm left-handed? Like, now you have to sign documents backwards. So it's not even the big lies I'm worried about. It's like a little lie that like you just have to maintain. Now you have to keep up with this promise, or the AI goes, yeah, I'm a vegan too. And so now every time you see this person, you have to pretend to be vegan.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, this sounds like a nightmare, keeping up with AI's lies. That's a tough one. Yeah, definitely. I think feeding the right data to the AIs, whether it's like a RAG application, at this point, I think it's mostly going to be RAG, but I guess you have to be responsible to giving the AI or the RAG application the most up-to-date data yourself. But that's just a whole other rabbit hole of making sure your data is cleaned before you even put it into an AI.
Yeah, that brings up something really interesting to me. So I'm working on a project now for a client who uses his conversations with other people, like his transcripts, to train the AI. But the problem is, if you just feed the transcript, it has both sides of the conversation. And if I just strip out the other person completely, then it's like a bunch of non sequiturs because you don't know what question was asked. So you have to go through this process. This is exactly what I'm building right now, of transferring each time the other person speaks just into a question that's like really small so that it won't get misread as data when it gets put into the database when you're actually training the AI to talk like him. And I think that's really that critical part, is like any small thing can accidentally infect your data. There's this saying that it takes only a teaspoon of urine to ruin a cask of whiskey if someone sees you put it in there. So it's one little thing can infect it and cause these huge problems. And so exactly, you're right, is that create that policy, and also creating an update policy, like how often are you going to update the information and how much information do you want it to have? I've seen where people give too much information or too little. Like sometimes people don't want to tell you their name, and that's too much. And sometimes people give like where they live and their address. I'm like, you have to find that balance, because anything that's in the AI eventually will say it to someone. So I think you're really onto something, which is that there is this new skill. Like we all thought the big AI job would be prompt engineer. And I don't think that's really the future. I think the future really is in automation, and really in like bot training or automation and automation building, which to me are really very next to each other, kind of very similar processes, and really thinking about things, because the process design is so important. I'll give you another example. A friend of mine was working on a project where they were taking phone calls from a large company, and they would use the AI to train the AI and then train the people. But the phone calls have secret data. They have like dangerous data, like people's credit card numbers or social security numbers. And I said, listen, you want that removed before the data gets to you, because not that he would ever do anything wrong, right? But if something goes wrong, who are they going to blame? Their own team or the contractor who's working on the AI project, or blame the AI? It gives them like an out if something goes wrong. And it's actually thinking of that is more important than the rest of the process. The platform doesn't matter. It's your design of the process. I'm realizing more and more as I build automations that drawing out the workflow before you do anything is 10 times more important than the technical part. And it's really interesting to see that, at least for the next year or two, I think that's actually going to be the cutting edge of AI, is the person who thinks of all the things that could go wrong and then prevents them, because otherwise it will happen to someone else. Like I knew 2 years ago, I go, some lawyer is going to get done when ChatGPT lies and they believe it, and it happened to someone. It's going to happen to someone, right? And then, some company's chatbot is going to say something wrong. It's always, you just don't want to be the one that's the first one it happens to and you get in the news. So with how you are building out sales tools and you're further in this direction, what are some of the things that like you have to stop your clients from doing, or like data getting put in that can infect or cause a problem like down the line? It sounds small now. Oops, I uploaded the wrong thing. But if you don't find it and pull it out of the database, eventually it becomes a problem.
Yeah. So currently the way things are running, it's just all run through us. So luckily we're not expecting or hoping that any clients are doing anything wrong. The big thing, as previously touched on, is like, for example, I was working on this use case where I was pulling individuals or scraping individuals in a specific region, and it pulls someone that's not in anywhere near that. And I check out the profile and everything, and I don't see like New York anywhere, for example. And imagine I use that in my messaging, because so I'm based out of New York. Sometimes I like to meet in person, right? If we have the opportunity, why not? So yeah, imagine sending that message to someone based out of like Bali and saying, "Oh, hey, I'm in New York. Let's get a coffee." And it's, wait, but there's nowhere on my profile does it say I'm in New York. What are you talking about? Did you mean to send this to me? So yeah, a lot of data cleaning up front is crucial. You want to make sure the data is clean. And that's where, like I said, we need to keep the human in the loop. We need to make sure that we're babysitting. And that starts with data cleaning.
It's really funny that you mentioned that, because I've never gotten one of those messages that's gotten my location correct. So I just got one 2 hours ago that was like, hey, you're in Boston. We can help you to learn this, how to do project management. And I get picked for always the wrong region. I usually get a lot of things about starting a franchise in Idaho. And I don't know why, what in my profile triggers franchise or Idaho. I've been to Idaho once for 3 days, like 10 years ago. And somehow, I don't know if they're really finding that data or it's just random, but whenever it's a LinkedIn sponsored message or an InMail, I know it's going to be wrong. It always feels misaddressed. And you're exactly right that even when I do data pulling in Sales Navigator, it gives me tons of false positives. And I have to manually go through and remove all the people that aren't the right fit that it pulled for the wrong reason, because it will pull the wrong word from their profile, or will pull like a post they reposted, not one they wrote. And that's very different. So I think what you're talking about is really why managed services are still a critical component. The idea that we can completely replace salespeople with AI salespeople, I think that maybe for a few years it will happen, and then people will hate them. The same way people hate phone trees. Like you hate when it goes push 7, push 8, push 6, just let me talk to someone. So whenever we see like those futuristic science fiction movies where it's like a hologram selling stuff, the people always hate the hologram. They never go, oh boy, a hologram salesperson, I'm excited. Even in fiction, they hate it. So I think you're really onto something. I think there's something very cool about humans still being in the loop. And I've noticed that's another thing you brought up, I think is really important, is that I've seen actually a new automation tool that came across my desk today. Their like USP is human in the loop. And I've actually been talking about this for a few weeks, which is there's some processes where I want there to be a person who double checks it. I've seen software that will write and send out emails for you. And I go, no, you have to read it before it gets sent, especially if you're sending to like your entire audience. So having a stop moment where you check before you go, okay, keep going, is so critical. So I think that the human in the loop is going to become a really big job in the future as well. So I think what you're talking about, very cool. I think you're really onto something. And this has been a really awesome episode because these are things that are really interesting, I think getting really important. So can you tell us a little bit about what kind of project you're working on, what you do at Hypergrowth, and maybe people can see if they want to work with you, where they can find you?
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate it. Yeah. So currently at Hypergrowth, we're essentially, I think this is a new word, new term that I haven't used, but I'm going to take it from you, like a managed service, really, where we're helping companies generate leads, if we're going to put it simply. But internally, it's a whole process. It's a whole automation process. Some AI, some not. We try to be careful when and where to use it. If it's not necessary, then there's no point. You can build it automations without the AI portion to it, and then that still will help us do a lot more and get a lot more done. Essentially, it's a very, how would you say, a very detailed approach to lead generation. It's not about the quantity, but more so the quality of everything, not just the leads that we're reaching out to, but also the messaging. We want to make sure that the messaging is relevant, personalized. People use them interchangeably, but personalized can mean, oh, hey, nice wiener dog. Are you interested in cloud services? It's okay. What does my dog have to do with cloud? So that's personalized, but it's not really relevant, right? So we want to make sure everything's relevant from the messaging to the people that we're targeting, and that we're like in hopes of getting the highest response rates, conversion rates. You can check us out at hypergrowthgtm.com. We have just a bit of solutions, but happy to continue a conversation and provide any guidance or advice, even if anyone's getting into building AIs or even just sales automations before they even touch the AI part. I'm happy to have that conversation.
I'm really glad you brought up personalization versus relevance, because personalization, I get it all the time where you can see that they've just put in a variable, or sometimes they forget to put it in and they just have the brackets, which says insert first name here or insert latest podcast episode. And that's the worst, because then the person knows and it really throws everything off. I think that relevance is really the future as well, because it's better to have 100 phone calls or 100 people who might become customers than a million people that are random. Like the chase for virality is a chase for mostly people that are not interested. It's such a small percentage, and you have to be so broad in order to appeal to everyone that you no longer appeal to your ideal customer. So I love that you brought that up. I think this is really cool. I think that people are going to find this useful. And I think this was a really powerful episode. that I think people are really going to dig on the Artificial Intelligence podcast. So thank you so much for being here. This was awesome. Thanks for listening to today's episode. Starting with AI can be scary. ChatGPT Profits is not only a bestseller, but also the missing instruction manual to make mastering ChatGPT a breeze. Bypass the hard stuff and get straight to success with ChatGPT Profits. As always, I would love for you to support the show by paying full price on Amazon. We can get it absolutely free for a limited time at artificialintelligencepod.com/gift. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Artificial Intelligence Podcast. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss another episode. We'll be back next Monday with more tips and tactics on how to leverage AI to escape that rat race. Head over to artificialintelligencepod.com now to see past episodes, leave a review, and check out all of our socials.